Thanks, and good afternoon, everyone. My name's Kevin Vogel. I'm the Vice President of Virtualization and Cloud Computing here at Champion Solutions Group. Today we're going to be learning more about cloud resiliency from Seagate, and Jason Homebrecker from Seagate will be going over some great topics and information that I think will help you make a decision if DR in the cloud is something you want to take a look at. So today's challenges, we have 5 ways the cloud is better for business when disaster strikes. We're going to show you how it works and give you a little bit of additional information. For those of you that don't know Champion Solutions Group, we've been in business since 1979. We have over $100 billion in revenue, $10 million in business insurance, $25 million line of credit, and 20 years of audited financials. What I'm trying to tell you is we've been around for a long time and we aren't going anywhere. We're a Microsoft Gold and Silver competencies in things like virtualization, data center, cloud platform, and in fact we happen to be Microsoft's Cloud Partner of the Year and Azure Partner of the Year. And with that, I am going to turn it over here to Jason and let him kick off today's presentation. Jason?
Thank you very much, Kevin. I appreciate that, and I appreciate everyone taking the time today to hear me ramble on a little bit about the cloud and what's going on out there in the marketplace. The first thing I always like to look at when I look at that is what's the IT challenges. And you know, there's a lot of stuff kind of going on out there, but I think it's important to understand what's driving people to look at the cloud and look at what's out there. And one of the basically the top 3 reasons people are looking at the cloud today, and specifically in the DR marketplace out there, and this has probably resonated with a lot of people out there looking, is you've always got to be able to have your business up and running. Tolerance for downtime in today's economy is next to nothing. If people are working 24/7, they've got mobile phones, they've got internet access, they've got systems. They put their kids to bed and they go work on email. They go work on systems. 10 years ago, people went to the office from 8 to 5 and they were done. In today's world, that doesn't happen. What that also means is the tolerance for downtime and the reliance on those IT systems has also increased. And that's one of the big reasons people are looking to upgrade and modify a lot of their DR strategy and looking at some of the DR as a service. Regulations continue to get hotter. More and more financial institutions are looking at systems. There's a lot more requirements as you want to do business with bigger systems to reduce your risk. And part of reducing your risk is ensuring that you have a proper DR and a business continuity plan in place. And the big one that's happening right now is more with less. IT organizations across the globe are continuing to take on more and more and more without getting more and more budget. For example, if you look at phone systems, you look at fax systems. 10 years ago, those systems were physical systems that were out there. Today, that's a computer. Scanners, library systems, remote access systems. Everything that a business runs on today is driven more and more by IT. And there's more and more demand on those IT infrastructure and more on demand on the IT personnel that are out there. So you see these big drivers out there, and these are the drivers today that are driving a lot of people to say, well, what is the cloud and what should I look for in there? Next slide, please, Kevin. Specifically, the big thing that a lot of people have started to look at is backup is not enough. When you start thinking about some of the challenges I just talked about, you'll start to realize a lot of times as you start going through your planning scenarios that it's good that I have a backup, but what happens in a lot of things? The media has hyped up a lot of the coverage out there to show you that a hurricane hitting is now devastating businesses. Did hurricanes happen 10 years ago? Absolutely. But it's not at the scrutiny that's out there today. And today's CIOs are looking at this saying, I don't want my business to be up on the news from there. And they're looking to say, okay, I've got a backup, but how do I recover? Do I have a formal plan? What happens to run my secondary applications? And people. One of the big ones that continues to be missing is people. I have a great DR plan. I have a huge documentation. I've got 5 servers up and running and 500 miles away. But the problem is I don't have the people to do it. And a lot of systems today with the cloud are starting to drive solutions to get you over a lot of these hurdles for today's business. Next slide, please. So I like this slide because it kind of points out the problems of a lot of people in the past, where people think they can do it themselves. And the problem is you start to add all the complexity, you start to add the demand, you start to now have jack of all trades people that are running your IT systems. You start to question, the ability to do it yourself. And there's, a ton of different areas that are on there, from human capital, the expertise, the awareness, data center, unexpected issues. The technology is every 3 years that you're looking at a complete cycle of growth from there. And then you've got, just the recovery testing. A lot of businesses 5 years ago when I started, 8 years ago when I started this business, and really in 5 years ago, when I talked with a lot of IT professionals, they'd say, okay, I tested my DR plan. What did that mean? That meant I went to a DR site, I traveled 500 miles to 1,000 miles away. I showed up and I tested 2-3 servers. But they had 50, they had 100 servers, and they just assumed the rest of them worked. And I can tell you with absolute confidence that that's not the case, especially when you have the evolving systems of IT today. And these challenges are and the reason they only tested 2 or 3 was the time. It didn't have the time, didn't have the capabilities to really go out and do a full test. Now with the cloud are being solved, and I think that's really important for you to go out and say, well, do I want to do it myself, or do I want to look at some of the more modern technologies out there to help drive and fix these problems for me? Next slide, please. So summing it up, I started this business for Seagate 8 years ago, and these are probably the top things that I hear from questions from customers that are out there. They've got to be able to remove tape from their problem, get their data off-site securely and efficiently. They've got to be able to have a unified solution that's not one solution for DR, one solution for backup, one solution for this, and having 4 or 5 vendors. In the event of a disaster, they want the one throat to choke that can go out and say, yes, fix me that problem. Recovery time, more and more businesses, due to that on-demand lifestyle, the high demand on IT, are lowering their RTO or recovery time objective. Where it used to be 48 hours is now looking at sub 24 hours, 4 hours, 1 hour. Businesses are continuing to drive those RTOs down and do it faster, quicker from a recovery perspective. And the final one that's probably from a cloud experience is the notion of CapEx or capital expenditures. Less and less businesses can afford to go out and build out an entire DR site and spend $1 million. But they can't afford a few $1,000s a month to get a secondary site up and running should a disaster happen, and using the cloud to continue to drive that. And those are probably the big 4 drivers that we talk about from there. So what I'd like to do now, if you go to the next slide, is talk a little about
Jason, we can't hear you.
Okay.
Okay.
Hello? Next slide.
We couldn't hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened there. My phone was cut.
Okay.
Next slide, please. Hello?
Yeah, I went to the next slide.
Oh, holy cow. I'm not seeing it. I apologize. I'm just seeing 5 ways the system. Is it on 5 ways or availability?
Availability.
Oh, great. I'm not seeing it. 1 second. I'm not either. I'm just seeing the agenda. I apologize.
Hold on. Okay. How's that?
There we go. Perfect. So availability. First reason that the cloud has significant advantages. I apologize for all of those on there. Small technical difficulty there. Big reason people are moving to the cloud, availability. Getting your systems up and running in a guaranteed manner. The cloud is everywhere. There's data centers across the world, there's across the globe, across the United States. The notion of taking a tape 500 miles away or 1,000 miles or 100 miles away or 30 miles away becomes irrelevant when you think about the cloud. You have the ability now to to not worry about having your IT professionals drive halfway across the country, fly across the country. You can log into your systems, push the button, and have your entire systems up and running on the West Coast, on the East Coast, depending on where you've driven it. And typically, SLAs now drive a lot of the cloud business, especially in the DR service realm. You can have SLAs that are guaranteeing you those SLAs that say your business will be back up and running 1, 24, 48 hours. These are just some of the SLAs that we offer. There's a lot more SLAs out there in the marketplace. Next slide, please. Support. This is again, a huge driver for a lot of people that are out there, especially in the SMB or SME market. The mid-market is probably the fastest adopter of the cloud in the marketplace, and the ability to have an IT team that's outside of the region, have the IT team that can continue to drive your resources in the event something should happen. Hurricane comes in. If I look at Hurricane Sandy, for example, a lot of people had all of their resources sitting in New York or within, the outlying, 50 to 100 mile region, and they were busy evacuating. Having the ability to have a support personnel sitting in Colorado, in California, in Chicago, in Utah, driving and continuing to make sure your business up and running is a huge motivator for a lot of companies out there today to be able to say, I've got the ability to run my business no matter what happens. Next slide, please. Monitoring, proactive monitoring. This is a big one for a lot of companies because now you're turning around, not only do you have that support team out there, not only do you have the availability out there, but you've got systems sitting there and continuing to monitor your business, looking at your business and saying, listen, the only thing that this company does is DR. And part of that DR is to make sure that you have the availability to recover. And more importantly, the title of this whole session was the resiliency, and making sure your business is resilient. And part of resiliency starts not with waiting for the disaster to happen, but to actually sit there and look at it. Mr. Customer, you're in the zone. We recommend you doing X, Y, and Z to help you prevent your data loss. Looking at systems, early warnings, continuous systems, preemptive failovers. A lot of the systems today, as you start looking at some of the solutions that are out there with some of the replication solutions, you can actually fail over, run out of the cloud for, say, the weekend while a storm or whatever disaster passes through. If nothing happens, great. You never lost a downtime. If something does happen, great. You never lost any downtime. And a lot of businesses are starting to look at this to make their business more resilient and continuing to drive this resiliency throughout their entire business to avoid the problem of the CEO calling that IT director and say, why did we have a downtime when that hit? Why didn't we do this? With a lot of these businesses that are out there and using the cloud, they're avoiding downtime, and they're just saying, great, we didn't even have the possibility of having downtime because we're proactive on there, and we relied on the partner to continue to drive that for us. Next slide, please, Kevin. On-demand access. Another huge benefit from the cloud in the availability world, where you're not just saying, I've got the physical assets, but this is all I've got. A lot of these cloud providers have the ability to burst with your systems. So should something happen and you can't, and they're not meeting those systems, they can add more resources to the pool. They can continue to have you connected worldwide, anywhere. So your original DR plan was to go from Florida to Atlanta. Well, unfortunately, you can't get to Atlanta, so now my entire systems are not available in Atlanta. I'm going to Charlotte. That's great. With the cloud, you've got the ability to connect anywhere, anytime, any place, whether VPN connections, SSLs, a lot of the technology out there to enabling your business to be able to work on demand and have the flexible and freedom to go in and say, it's not just one point that I need to recover from. I need to be able to, recover my business from anywhere. And that's really huge for a lot of businesses out there. Next slide, please. And then going back on there, continuing on with the systems, there's no limits to a lot of the systems. With the cloud, you've got a lot of infrastructure sitting in a lot of these cloud facilities where they can continue to grow with your business without, having to look and saying, well, you've got to buy 10 new servers every year as you continue to do it. You've got endless amounts of storage, especially, with companies like that are out there, is they've got thousands and thousands. Where you might have a terabyte of data, they've got petabytes of data. Where you have a petabyte of data, they have a zettabyte of data that are on there. And making that affordable for you to kind of move forward. The cloud is all about this burstability, and giving you the flexibility that you don't have a limit. As long as you can grow, they can grow with you. And that's one of the big things that you should look for from a cloud provider is those limits, is making sure that they can continue to keep your systems up and running no matter what, and continue to drive that as far as your demands need on there. Kevin, next slide, please. Cheaper, faster, and better. This is huge for a lot of people out there, and I think one of the things that people get caught up in the cloud is faster, or is better, or is cheaper. And cheaper. Everybody thinks virtualization, they think cloud, they think cheaper. But I also actually think that you're selling yourself short a lot when you're looking at that, because it's actually, sometimes it's better. And why it's better is because you've got automation, you've got predictability, you've got scalability in there. And with that, where you can go out and build a single server inside of your data center, maybe order the server, even if it gets there, it takes you, let's just say 2 hours, 3 hours to build that server. In the cloud, you can push a button and have 50 servers done in 10 minutes. And a lot of that's done through scale. It's done through automation. It's done through a lot of the more modern technology that's out there. And a lot of that's linking the systems, preemptively striking, and continue to drive it better. So not only is there ability to get things cheaper, but you can actually get them better and typically faster in the event of a disaster on there. And this is a big motivator for a lot of companies to look at the cloud to say, I don't have to worry about it because I can actually do it faster in the cloud. Next slide, please. So I've talked a little bit about it, bigger, better, faster. I've talked about the on-demand pieces. But at the end of the day, 95% of the clients that are going to go out there, it is about the cheaper on there. And for a lot of clients, they do save money by going to the cloud, and they get the benefits of all the pieces I just talked about. This is just one quick example of a client that was looking to building out their data centers. And they were looking to basically upgrade and replace a secondary data center, or they had the choice to move to the cloud. And you can see, when you start looking at all of the hardware costs, the soft costs, and then all the services that are wrapped around it, they started to save a significant amount. They also started to save significant amount on savings from a personnel perspective. They were able to start reducing the headcount that were focused on doing DR plan, having a secondary staff in a secondary location, by just saying, great, we'll just make sure to update our DR plan, and we'll rely on the DR on a DR company as a service to be my secondary staff and start cutting some of the staffing costs. The net result for them in the first year was just saving over $90,000 for them. And this is just a small business that's out there. As you scale up the business, those thousands of dollars can be into the millions for some of the much larger companies as they continue to drive scale. Next slide, please, Kevin. So there's the solutions that we've talked about, the 5 reasons on why, from that. Take just a few minutes here, and I'm just going to run through some very quick slides on, some of the solutions from a DR as a service. I've talked about a little bit on backup. I've talked a little bit about replication. There's a variety of solutions that are out there, and I just want to kind of highlight some of the solutions that are out there. And should you want to hear more about those, we can follow up with those at a later time. Next slide, please. So the 1-hour solution, at least from the Seagate side of the house, typically is going to look at a replication solution. You're going to look at some kind of real-time replication. For ours, it's agent-based, where they're going to replicate the real-time, going to replicate each server real-time into the cloud, have them secured by a firewall, sitting there in a hot environment, ready to go. Typically can fail over as fast as typically is about 5-minute failover time to kind of get it done. But typically what you're going to see out there is the SLA, especially from our side, is the 1 hour is the worst case scenario, but you're going to see typically 5 minutes is the average on there. And you're going to see a variety of different solutions from different companies where they'll say, well, we'll have 5 minutes, but will you guarantee those 5 minutes? And that's a different question from there. And ours is on there is we'll guarantee the 1 hour from there and give you the worst case scenario, because it's much better to understand what's the absolute worst case from a scenario. Next slide, please. Moving up, typically what you're going to see in a 24, 48-hour SLA, you're going to see a backup-based solution. This will be a solution that typically backs up 1 to, possibly every hour from there, depending on your RTO or RPO needs, on there. but you have the ability to kind of recover those systems. The systems are sitting there next to your data. In the event of a disaster, the data is reloaded from the backups and onto those warm servers sitting there. Those warm servers become hot. Typically what you're expecting is somewhere between 24 and 48 hours, depending on how much data you've got and the willingness to pay for the systems to be up and running on there. And again, these systems can be done. On average, if you look at Hurricane Sandy, when we were hit with that one, 21 clients declared in the 24-hour range from the Seagate side of the house with 24-hour SLA. The average came up at about 6 hours. But they came up with the expectation that they possibly could take 24 hours on there. And I think it's important for a lot of businesses to say, not to buy into the marketing to say, oh, well, it's going to be 6 hours, or it's going to be instant recovery. I can tell you right now, backups, instant recovery, doesn't mean your systems are up and running. The IP addresses are up and running. The DNS entries aren't up and running. There's a lot of systems not up and running with an instant recovery. So managing your expectations to say, worst case, probably 24 hours from a backup perspective is probably a good mindset for a lot of businesses out there. Next slide. Another area you're seeing a lot of people in the cloud is start to move towards self-managed. They have the IT staff, they have the systems, they know the automations out there, a lot of systems. So they're saying, it's great. I'll go ahead and do the self-managed, but I need the hardware, I need the DR plan, I need the practices, I need the expertise, but I do have a person that can run through and click through the 10 steps. And so what you're seeing now is, the non-SLA driven systems where they're getting the data replicated, in backup format. They're having the warm system stand by. They're getting a DR plan. They're getting everything that they need. The only difference is instead of having a true managed service where they just push a button or pick up the phone and call, they have their own IT staff kind of running through those automated steps and continue to drive through that. And that's something we're seeing more and more today. As technology evolves, you're seeing more and more people say, I want the cheaper solution. I've got IT staff in 2 locations. I just need to be able to cut out my data center and have a DR solution on there that works for them, and they can drive it from there. And so you'll see a lot of self-managed solutions out there. Next slide. Then you start to see NetApp-based solutions or SAN-based solutions. They vary just slightly differently from there, and there's 2 variations that we offer on here. One for Evault and SnapMirror, basically a backup-based or real-time replication-based systems. Both are going to be very similar to the solutions we talked about up top from an Evault backup perspective or a backup, but these are done at the SAN level where you'll have snapshots of your entire SAN sent over to the cloud and being able to spin those snapshots up in the cloud from there. And there's really 2 flavors from it. You've got the data protection, which will give you long-term retentions and all of the variants of a backup, and the ability also to spin up your systems in the event of a disaster. And if you go to the next slide, please. You also have the disaster recovery systems where you can do real-time replication and get you down to that sub 1 hour category, typically around about a 15-minute recovery time and recovery point objective. As you want to continue to bring those systems back up and running. And I think it's important to note that it's not one size fits all. There's clients out there that say, I've got primary data sitting on a SAN and they're going to do 1 hour for that. They've got a couple servers sitting in another data center but doesn't have a SAN, so they do the agent based. They've got their tier 2 systems which can be done on a 24-hour SLA, and then they've got other remote systems that they can do with either self-managed or 48 or sometime a longer SLA for a tier 2, tier 3 type system. And it's important to go into a vendor to be able to sit to know that they can actually manage and cover all the ranges that you're looking for from them. And they're not going to say, well, we only do it this way, so therefore we recommend you continue to go forward. Now, there's going to be a lot of vendors that are going to say, well, that's all we can do, and you're going to find 5 vendors out there that say all they can do, and that's going to be fairly common out there in the marketplace. But it's important to be able to look at it and see if we can put a lot of those solutions together to give you the optimal design to manage your DR plan for what your budget allows and what your boss is demanding from you in the marketplace. Next slide, please. So if I want to look up, just to keep on track here, I'm going to run through a quick summary here on kind of what we covered today, and run through the next steps on it. Next step. So the one thing from from an Evault perspective or a Seagate perspective on there is we have been in the DR business. I was actually the founder of the DR business in 2007, started it and built it up. There's now been 2 reports come out. There's been a Magic Quadrant and there's been a Wave report in the last year. Seagate was announced as a leader in the Wave report and a visionary in the Magic Quadrant on there. One of the only vendors out here on the marketplace that are going to be able to do both of those and have good visibility, and expect in the fall to see an IDC report from a MarketScape perspective, and you'll see Seagate as well featured, Evault/Seagate featured on there. The big one that Seagate focuses on is progressive SLAs. The guarantees in which Seagate provides are probably the best in the business when I talked about it. I talked about a 1-hour SLA. Gartner and Forrester will recognize that 1-hour SLA, while we're saying 1 hour and others are saying 5 minutes, our guarantees are the best. Money back guarantee, the ability to rip up your contract and walk away, the actual managing of expectations to say this is what you will see in the event of a disaster, probably the best in the business, and on there. Plan enhancements, security, continuing to drive the systems is some of the big features you'll see from Seagate. You can look at third-party analysts to go through and drive some of those results for you. Next slide, please. So if you look at Evault from a Seagate perspective, and just for those that are new on there, Evault and Seagate are kind of one and the same. Evault was a wholly owned subsidiary of Seagate, and is now just, Seagate is a reverse merger, if you will, pulled the company back in and just become Seagate. So what you'll have now from a technology portfolio, you really have the choice of kind of 4 different buckets. You'd have our Evault technology, which is our backup-based solution, the replication solution, which drives the 1-hour solution. You've got SnapVault, which is NetApp, to drive a backup solution for the NetApp filers. And you've got the SnapMirror, which is a real-time replication solution within the NetApp filer. All of those portfolios can continue to drive. Depending on your SLA, depending on your requirements and needs, you can continue to find and fine-tune your systems up and down the stack within those portfolio. Next slide, please. Just to kind of close up, the big thing that on there that Seagate focuses on is that managed service experience, is the ability to drive those services to drive the services for the customers and give them the experience they need. And a lot of that's done through managed services. Within those managed services, as we talked about, DR auditing type requirements. For a lot of businesses, they're looking for a DR plan. They're looking for a results document. They're looking for somebody to come in, and when the auditor walks in the door, to say, here's the piece of paper. This paper covers every server we tested, how long it took, what steps were taken, the actions, everything that happens within that DR plan. And that's standard within all of our offerings, where we come in and give you all of the documentation and walk you and guide you through the entire service as a managed service as you're coming on and giving. And a lot of our clients are new to DR because they've looked at it from a traditional perspective 5 years ago. A, they were unable to afford it, and B, the technology didn't match. In today's solution, they can now afford it. When I started DR, the DR offering, the DR for the rest of us was the slogan that I was going for. And I think that's important for a lot of businesses to say, I was unable to do DR in the past because of their complex requirements, because of the CapEx the need of it. And today, with the cloud and with a lot of services like Seagate's able to offer, I can now have a DR plan that I was unable to afford before. Now, the only problem is I don't understand it, so signing up with a company that does the managed services, allowing them to guide you through the systems, makes a much better experience for a lot of clients. Next slide, please. And then, from a new age, we talked about the new, the services with the self-managed. A lot of clients are wanting portals. And one of the newer features within the Seagate system is the portal where customers can go in. Inside of that portal, they can build their own DR plan. They can go through with the scheduling of the DR schedule, figuring out what is going to be on the DR plan, what's not. If I want to add servers, subtract servers, I don't have to pick up the phone and call. I just log into the portal, click on a couple things, switch a couple servers around, and I'm guaranteed to recover. A lot of the automation that was in the previously was done behind the scenes is now being brought forward with a lot of these portals out there in the technology, allowing companies to do the self-managed services and drive those services so they can go in, log in, and away they go. Next slide, please. quickly summing up a lot of what we covered, I've been rambling quite quickly for the last 30 minutes or so, but I just want to kind of summarize the real advantages for the cloud, I feel, but also for DR as a service and why a lot of people look at it. You've got assured data protection. You have to find a way to cover your data. So if something happened, you need to have that protection on there, and the DR as a service can kind of really can deliver that. The operational expense on there, OpEx pricing, huge value prop for a lot of clients that are looking to move to the cloud. That's why they're driving to the cloud, is they want to reduce their capital expense and move to an operational expense. No question there. I think that goes synonymous with the cloud. Improved RTO. I talked about this earlier. With a lot of the technology out there, you're not relying on tape, you're not relying on travel times, you're not relying on the time it takes to build 50 servers. You now are pushing a button, 50 servers come up. You have a disaster, push the button, and you're up and running. What maybe took you 2 or 3 hours, 2 or 3 days to do before, by the time you traveled, got there, got tapes on there, can now be done in 5 to 10 minutes on there. We're drastically reducing the recovery time for a lot of clients. Lower burden and lower cost goes, across the board. I think with a lot of people out there, eliminating the secondary site, eliminating the burden from people. So having employees at secondary sites just focused on DR, reallocating those employees to focus on more mission critical business operations, and quit focused on the DR, quit focused on backup and running a lot of those systems. Getting to the point where they push a button and say, great, I'm going to go do that, but I'm going to keep my business up and running for the remaining part of the day and not worry about DR for that. Huge burden for a lot of clients out there, and having the ability just to be able to outsource that, push a button, and have the reliability and a guarantee behind it to know their business will come up in the event of disaster, because not only do they see it during the DR test and lived it, but they've also got some contractual guarantees by an $18 billion company saying they'll get your money back. They're that confident on it. We've never missed an SLA with any of our businesses from a client's perspective, and anytime the client comes on board, we can guarantee that we'll have those up and running. Worst case scenario by our SLA guarantee, and that's a huge relief for a lot of clients out there in the marketplace. Next slide, please. Kevin, I'm going to go ahead and turn this back over to you.
All right.
At this point, I'm right at my 30-minute mark.
Yes, you are, Jason. And I do have a couple of questions for you as I looked at the slides. Number one, do I have to be completely virtualized to take advantage of your DR solution?
Absolutely not. And that's, it's going to be, again, as you continue to fit the mold for different solutions. We do have solutions that are very, focused on a single or, homogeneous environment that's completely virtualized. There's solutions for that. There's solutions that do cover the mixed physical servers. So the 1-hour SLA can cover both virtual or physical systems. There is VMware replication. There's Hyper-V systems. There's a variety of different systems on there, and they're all supported across the board. So it's not that you have to be the one-size-fits-all and 100% virtualized. You can still have it, and in fact, majority of our clients today still have, especially in the enterprise, that big SQL server, that big AIX server. That's still a physical server out there for a lot of these things that are running a lot of their SAP systems, their Oracle systems, in the background. And again, if they could only do the Windows servers that are virtualized, they'd only be able to do a portion of their business. So I think it's important to note that yes, can be covered from a virtual perspective and a physical perspective within our solution portfolio.
Well, that's great because most of our customers, they tell you they're 70 or 80% virtualized. Well, in my mind, that still means that they're 20 to 30% physical. So they need that combination of both environments. And then my other question is on NetApp, because it seems like you're very integrated with NetApp. Is there a certain level of code or certain system like the 2000, 3000 systems? Do I have to be on tap 8 or cluster on tap or anything like that to be able to utilize those options?
Yes and no. So we have the 7-mode support, we have the CDOT support on there, and the big thing is as you go through from a technical, as you dive in, I think that's one of the big things that we can offer, with your teams, is getting in there and finding out what's going to fit. As you go through and figure out what you need. For example, if you're looking to do that 1 hour SLA from a snap mirror perspective, you've got to start matching some of the versions from there. And when you start looking at matching it, you can go to some of the shared modes, which means you have to go up to the highest, the latest, and greatest. But if you're not willing to, there's also dedicated modes where there's private filers out there, whether they're virtual or physical filers from there, that allow you to reverse that back. And if you wanted to run 8.1.2 for some reason, on one of the filers for C mode, or you wanted to run 8. Whatever version for 7 mode. There's solutions for both, and I think it's important for you to know to go open-minded, but also to sit down with your solution expert and help them guide you on why you should or should not upgrade. And there's advantages to both sides to it, Kevin. And I think it's important to not just go in willy-nilly and say, hey, I'm going to upgrade everything because I want my DR. That's a poor reason to do it. What you should do is look at all the ramifications. Should I upgrade? What are my benefits? If I don't upgrade, what are the downsides? And I think that's one of the solution sets that, sitting down with a champion, a champion solutions group and being able to drive through that home, they can kind of help guide you on the pluses and the minuses of doing both.
Yeah, as you know, Jason, we're a huge NetApp partner, obviously, VMware Infrastructure Partner of the Year. So, we can help people, and that's where it's really important on the next steps to get a hold of your champion rep. You can call them here at 800-771-7000. We do offer free cloud assessments, excuse me, for both DR and anything around cloud like software as a service, infrastructure as a service, and so on. With that, I'm going to open it up to questions. Keith, if you're there, I'd like to open it up for any questions we might have.
Certainly. At this time, if you'd like to ask a question, please press star and 1 on your touch-tone telephone. If you find your question has been answered, you can remove yourself from the queue by pressing the pound key. Once again, to ask a question, please press star and 1 on your touch-tone phone, and we can pause a few moments to allow questions to queue.
All right, thanks, Keith. And Jason, as you probably know, it's hurricane season down here in South Florida. I'm based in Boca Raton, so this is a very important topic for us down here in South Florida and really in the southeast United States with all the hurricane traffic we get. Even though you brought up Sandy, and I mean, you could be anywhere. You could be in New York or Boston or almost anywhere now and still have some type of disaster that's going to hit you.
Yeah, I intentionally brought up Sandy as I figured you being in Florida, I'd avoid the Florida stories and try to go north a little bit. But we have stories for both, if you will, for some of the other ones that are out there. And I think it is important, a lot of clients that they looked at it, and Hurricane Sandy was the perfect example, whereas the first hurricane hit, okay, hurricanes don't hit New York. Second one hit, which was Sandy, hurricanes do hit New York. And I think it's important to note that, lightning can strike twice, and hurricanes definitely can strike twice on a lot of businesses. And I think that's brought a lot of that hyper-awareness that I was talking about, especially within the media and within a lot of businesses, to have them go back and rethink some of their systems to say, you know what, I do have to have something. There is a bigger possibility than I thought for a lot of these systems.
All right, Keith, do you have anybody for us?
We have no questions at this time, but I'll remind everyone it's star and 1 to get in queue.
All right, well, Jason, I think you did a great job. You might have done too good a job where they don't have any questions. But again, please reach out for your champion representative. Like I said, we do free cloud assessments. We'll be able to tell you, what you can do, how you can do it, and really our strengths are that we do have a great knowledge of traditional IT and integrating cloud seamlessly into that environment. And I think you'll find that our assessments are really full of information, and you can't beat the price, that's for sure. Jason, I want to thank you and Seagate, Evault. I don't know which name to call you, but I guess it's a combination of all of them for helping us out today. Keith, any questions before we end this?
Yes, we do have one, and we can go to Jim Dringham with Campus Crusade for Christ. Please go ahead.
Okay. Hi, Jim.
Hi. You talked about NetApp, but we're an EMC shop, so we're wondering what you have in the future for EMC, SAN, and NAS.
Obviously from a Seagate perspective, EMC is a very large partner of ours. We don't have the formalized DR offerings out there, but I do expect in the next 12 months to continue to have something Especially with the Vipper and some of the other solutions that they're coming out with, we are actively working with them and driving towards solutions on there. They're just not available, on today's portfolio, but they are definitely something that you can't avoid. EMC's everywhere as well, and we're driving towards that. We just don't have them, completed today. From our side.
All right, thank you, Jim.
Okay. And we have no further questions at this time.
All right, well, with that, then I'm going to end it. And again, thanks, Jason, and have a great 4th of July, and be safe.